Welcome to the Better Outcomes podcast, where we discuss all things leadership, sales, and communication in Australian business. At Better Outcomes Training, we provide world-class training solutions for businesses who want to arm their teams with cutting-edge skills to lead better, sell better, and enjoy more success, purpose, and profit from the work they do. For a full breakdown of all the courses we offer, visit www.better-outcomes.com.au. There's also a link in the description. Now, on to today's podcast. Enjoy.
Another podcast. Back again. Better Outcomes Training. Welcome, everyone. Paulie, how are you?
I'm very good, cuz. I'm very good, mate. Thank you. How you doing? How you doing? What's going on? You just
Good.
back from your big trip, yeah?
Yeah, busy times. Busy times. As always, I thought I was busy before. I always say this. I thought I was busy before, and now I'm even busier. I don't know where I keep finding this time from.
Yeah.
But just got home from a good trip back to New Zealand. Allegedly, someone was celebrating a 50th birthday.
Allegedly. You want to keep that one under wraps, yeah?
Yeah, I did before I left, and now that I'm an old man, I can let it out of the woodwork. But yeah, no, it was a great trip. Managed to accidentally turn it into a partial family reunion. Well, there's quite a few family members there, and it was a cracking trip all round. Really good to get away, reset a little bit, especially to my little part of the world, which is a little place called Gisborne in New Zealand.
Yep.
Nice little isolated part of the world, and great town, cracking little town, and cool people, and laid back, and everyone gets around in gumboots, and it's really pretty cool. And took the kids with me and wife, and we had a great time. So, but back now and back into it. Seem to be busier than ever. Seem to be busier than ever. But yourself, staying busy as always?
Yeah, good, man. I've got a launch of a new training approach that we're going to bring on, which is an incubator process for building world-class salespeople. So it's going to be like an incubator process is probably the best thing I can say. But we're going to do a trial of it now. But I'm of the conviction that we can go a step further than just providing good training, and actually start to really not just give people good breakthroughs and they have that moment of inspiration and all that good stuff, and that they go away and apply, but actually take people who are maybe by their own admission sort of average in their market, and actually over a certain amount of time training them up to be the best of what they do. So it'll be an interesting concept. It's an interesting concept. I think we can get some good traction here, but with there's so many clients out there who are looking for great salespeople. If we can get this right, it's a great opportunity to support people, to really help them get those better outcomes, those much better outcomes.
It is. We've spoken about this for a little bit now.
Yeah.
We've been talking about this concept your concept, and it's a fantastic opportunity, especially when you think about the level of personal development that happens in and around sales, and being able to really target someone and work intensely alongside them is something that I think the Australian market really needs.
Yeah, and I think there's so many aspects that can tie into it. I mean, I think a lot of time people think that training is just about the skill sets, and it is. But I mean, ultimately, we don't just want to give people skills. We want to give them skills they're going to go and use. And there can often be a difference there because, often people don't always, if the training is not, to pinpoint, then very often people cannot associate with the actual strategy and they disconnected from it. And if somebody's not comfortable and confident using that strategy, they're not going to use it. Or they snap back to old behaviors. So effectively, if we can start that process to really provide that motivation, a regular strategy for a different area of selling and all the different areas that we can cover off there. But it's like that professional ongoing development, one thing per week to focus on, rather than sort of an overwhelm, sort of, a huge amount of information in a very short amount of time. Plus the motivation. And I think with selling as well, motivation, it's easy to be motivated when you're doing well, but particularly and I had a conversation with somebody about this on Friday, actually, with regards to if we're going to start seeing now, economic headwinds coming up. So we start becoming a lot harder. Salespeople are going to have a real rough time of it because effectively, if people are tightening their purse strings, you have to be able to communicate in a way that builds even more of that value. So I think it's going to be interesting. We'll see how we go with it. I think it's a concept I've been successful in helping with people with other areas before, sort of the incubator process type of situation. But I really think it can have a massive impact on the sales aspect. And here's the other thing as well, is when you really start getting good traction at work and things start going really well at work, I think that has a big positive impact on other areas of life as well. Although I know I'm qualified to talk about business, I know I'm not qualified to talk about life, apparently. But I think everybody listening to this, and because I'm sure you resonate with this as well, is that if things are going well at work, things are easier to deal with at home, and in life starts to become better as well. I think everything's interconnected, you know?
Of course. Well, being over 50 now, I'm qualified to talk about this.
Well done, mate. Well done.
I'm actually not, but I understand what you're talking about with the sales incubator. I think one of the really cool things about it is that you will also help to tailor the training to that person's industry, to their area of expertise, which is hard sometimes with training. We're actually going to talk about some problems that we see, some common problems that we see in training.
Okay.
With people accepting the areas they struggle with, things like that. So this kind of ties in well. I know myself that if you're learning something new, it's hard. Sometimes it's very hard to relate to the information when you can't put it in your own context.
Absolutely.
So I had a very good teacher at school. He's a rugby coach too. Ian McDonald. He was a genius when it came to this. I'll call him a genius because he made it work for me in terms of a simple strategy that he gave me when I was learning. I was actually learning. I went from playing soccer to playing rugby, and I was kicking goals, and I was having a real hard time. I got a bit of help off a couple of people, and he said to me, "Listen, boy, if you're learning something new, you need to speak to as many different people as you can about it, people who know about it, and that will give you a lot of different points of view."
Yeah.
And what you need to do is you need to tailor that all that information to suit yourself.
Yeah.
Because everyone does everything different. The outcome you're looking for, how you get there, is irrelevant. The process of getting there is very, very important, but the how you do it compared to everyone else doesn't matter, as long as it works for you and it gives you that out. So I've always tried to take that on when I'm learning something new. Ask as many questions as you can from people that you know and can trust, and online help. There's a plethora of information, and everything's on YouTube. Everything's on YouTube. Audio books. The amount of information that you can find about a certain topic is unmatched in history at the moment. So, but having you have that ability because of your experience that you can tailor the sales training to that person's particular needs.
That's one of the that's one of the reasons why I've said that for the actual process, for the trial process we're going through, or for the beta testing that we're going to go through, I want a multitude of different industries represented, because I had a client who said to me that he had maybe 10 of his team he wanted to get on there. I said, wow. Whilst I love the enthusiasm, it's like I want to be able to have, there's 20 people maximum for the initial beta testing. And I want to have, 6, 7, 8, 9 different industries represented, because I have to be able to take that theoretical learning, break it down to the practical applicable steps, so that people understand it, they understand how to apply it, and how it would work in their life. And then contextual examples, if somebody's selling into the medical industry, or somebody selling into the IT industry, or somebody selling into the financial industry, or the retail industry. It's all those different examples of how it would work.
The bulk of it would be the same, wouldn't it? The bulk of the information's the same, but then it's when you get to the little last 10%, the little niche bits, and that is where it can really make a difference.
Absolutely. The theory would be the same. The hypothetical theory would be the same. The steps would be the same. So each strategy you can break down into actionable, practical, applicable steps, and then how would this actually play out in different industries. And again, it's a bit of a balancing act, because of course I don't have the frontline contextual knowledge that each of my clients does in their industry, but I can at least get it a little bit closer. Of course, I want them thinking for themselves how this would apply into, because that brings on a lot more of their ownership of it as well. But yes, certainly I want to be able to get it as close as possible so they can really take ownership of it and think, that would work well with this particular client or what have you. And the thought process is every week there's a new strategy, so they're just people incrementally over time take everything they've known to start with and start to build on those skill sets, one world-class strategy at a time, and they have the whole week to then go and apply it before the next week, they learn a new strategy in the next week.
Yes. Are these people you've already worked with? Are these people who you would consider already have foundations, like the
no, they wouldn't necessarily be
people.
They wouldn't necessarily be people I've worked with in the past. There's been a number of people who've reached out to me with regards to potential work, to do some training with them, and those have been clients that there's been a fair few recommendations and stuff like that, but I have to do an interview process with each person, because a lot of the people coming on board I haven't met yet, and I want to make sure it's a good fit as well. I don't want anybody investing time or money in something that they're not going to get a return from.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course. Now, staying on this track, it's something that I query a bit, and I think there's reasonably common areas that this happens in. Problems that you see in training when you're delivering training, areas where people struggle, areas that you think that they really need to work on, or there's common mistakes, or for a perfect example, I know you carry on about it a lot, and it took you a long time to make me understand, is the value that I bring.
Yeah.
The value that every person brings to the table. It's very hard to realize that.
Yeah.
You talked about it to me for so long, and I just couldn't see it. Now I understand that my experience is very unique to me. Not saying I'm the only one in the world that has it, but I've got a certain set of skills and a lot of value and a lot of knowledge that I bring with me to the table.
Because you are the only one. You are the only one who has the point of view that you have, because you're the only one who's lived the life that you have. You're the only one that's worked on. How many projects you worked on in your life? 100 projects. You're the only one who's worked on all those 100s. And here's the thing that people don't understand is that the experiences you've had create your point of view. And whenever we're when we're looking for critical thinking and problem solving teams, and we're building them, very often you want to make sure you get different points of view around that. And our points of view are purely a byproduct of everything we've been through up until that point. Your education, the projects you've worked on, your qualifications, how you were raised, all of this stuff. But you're the only one with that unique point of view because of the experiences you've been through. Now, in certain circumstances, that'd be very valuable. In other circumstances, it wouldn't be. If you asked me to go and conduct a light orchestra at the Opera House, it's probably not going to work out too well.
Yeah, agreed. Agreed.
I'll give it a crack until I got removed by security.
I'll give it a go. Yeah, I'll give it a go. The value that people. There's a lot of things you don't want me. You don't want to put me on speakerphone some days. I'll tell you that. It took me a long time to understand what you were trying to get through to me when you're talking about the value that I bring to any conversation, any role, any relationship. So that's something I think that a lot of people struggle with, and everyone has it.
Yep.
Getting them to understand what it is, know that they've got it, and then bring it out is a big thing. Now I know that this is one of your big things that you really push. So why do you think people struggle so much with this concept?
Okay, there's a few things that are going on here. Firstly, when we come to challenges that I'm trying to help people come through, firstly, a big thing is being able to create a growth mindset. And by that, what I mean is people realize they're not getting a particular outcome, but here's the thing. They are not blaming that particular outcome on anybody else. They are blaming that particular outcome on themselves. And here's the thing. They are not blaming that particular outcome on anybody else. They are blaming that particular outcome on themselves. And here's the thing. They are not blaming that particular outcome on anybody else. They are not blaming that particular outcome on anybody else. Okay, because this is a big issue. If somebody says I'm not achieving ABC, situation, and I can't achieve it because I didn't go to university, or I'm not qualified, or I don't have the right friends, or what have you, they're putting all of that power externally. And that's what I would deem as a very closed mindset with regards to solving problems. Fortunately, 99% of the people that I work with come with very open mindsets, and open mindsets, and what I might call growth mindsets, what Carol Dweck talks about with regards to a growth mindset.
Yeah.
And very often, and I'll do this with all of the training, and I'll go around the room and I'll ask each person what specifically they want to take away from the training. The fascinating thing is I see a lot of patterns. I see a hell of a lot of patterns when you train people. I think since like 2009, there's been more than 10,000 people that I've trained, and you see a lot of patterns that keep happening. And I believe, particularly when it comes to communication in business and people being able to communicate well, whether that's leadership, sales, negotiations, presenting, coaching, all of these different areas. If people want to improve in these areas, critical thinking and problem solving as well, effective business writing, all of this stuff, there are four main causes of people not getting the outcomes that they're after if they've got a growth mindset or an open mindset. Okay, now one of those things is underestimating the value you bring to the table, which I'll come back to. But here's the interesting thing. People very often, when I say what specifically do you want to take away, very often people will talk about the symptoms that they see, the symptoms that they see. So they might say something along the lines of, my team is not highly motivated. I want to be able to motivate my team to undertake new change management we're going through. Okay. Now that's a symptom. That's what I refer to as a symptom. That's what we see as an outcome. My team's not very motivated. They're not prepared to go out and make these changes I'm asking them to do. And if they do, they're doing it begrudgingly. And that puts a massive stress on me. So what I will then do is I will ask further questions with regards to getting exactly an idea of what that looks like. So I might say, okay, so you've got a team, you've got change management that you have to bring in. You've got a team that you have to motivate to be able to take on this change. What do you think is currently stopping you from doing it? Now, when I ask that question, or when I ask a question like that, and I'll openly acknowledge to the client that it's not an easy question to answer. But the reason I'm asking that question is I want to hear their words, because if I can hear their words, I can understand how they're thinking. And then we start hearing things like, well, maybe they might have an answer. Well, my team is very, my team don't make it a priority. That might be something. Or I just don't seem to click with the people I'm talking to try to get my point across. Now, what I want to do is I want to make sure that the individual takes the ownership with regard to creating that change. Because if I just say my team's not motivated, they're all lazy people, then again, I've given that power external. Okay. So I always want to be able to ask questions that allow the client to take on that desire to be able to make the change. Does that resonate? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So what I'll do very often is I'll ask these deeper questions with regards to, what do you think, if there was one thing that I could help you with regards to the motivation, with regards to being able to communicate that better for people to be committed to it, what would it be? Well, I don't know how to effectively influence and persuade, or I don't feel confident in communicating, or I have personal conflict with some of those people. Now, those three things can all be dealt with in different ways, but effectively, I would take each one of those different things and I would approach it in a very unique way. If we just said the team just doesn't get it, or they're lazy, or what have you, and I know we'd never say that, but when we say something like that, we give it's quite dismissive of the actual problem. So very often I'll ask these deeper questions. And the reason I ask the deeper questions is, firstly, I want the client thinking. And these are not questions very often that have been asked of clients in this degree to be able to get them to reflect and think about it. And I say this to my clients a lot as well. And you'll know this as well, because we've discussed this. Discovery is way more powerful than disclosure. Discovery is way more powerful than disclosure. And what I mean by that, as you know, is if I can get somebody to discover a potential solution or a way that could work for them because they know their context, it's much more powerful for them to discover it than me to disclose it. So if I said, oh, you just need to go do A, B, and C, and subconsciously you're thinking, oh, Paul, you don't even know what you're talking about. You don't know what I have to deal with. You don't know what these monsters are like. They're just going to dismiss it. Nothing's going to change. But if I can ask questions to get them started to think about their real experience, then effectively they're starting to discover potential solutions. And if I could say, okay, so there's 3 things that you're dealing with. Firstly, some interpersonal conflicts on a personal basis, and this happens. Secondly, a confidence aspect. Thirdly, the ability to influence and persuade. Those 3 things we can make improvements on. Yes, they give me a thumbs up. It's like, okay, fantastic. Now, which one of those 3 things would be most important for you to fix? We'll do all 3 of them. But if there was just one of them we wanted to fix, which one would it be? And primarily, I would say often it comes down to the confidence aspect. But I think that there's 4 major problems that 90% of people who come to training, they're illustrating symptoms that are driven by 4 deeper things. And 4 deeper things, and I think these are my 4 core components of developing soft skills in corporate training. 4 things are creating confidence. That's the first thing, okay? Or what I talk about, which is improving what I call professional self-esteem, which is driven by seeing the value you bring to the table. So confidence is the first one. Second one is starting to understand your target audience's view of the world. Because I say very, very often that I'll say to people at the beginning of the workshop, I say, okay, folks, listen, I'm going to start setting some frames now I want you thinking about. First, so one of the things is to become a world-class communicator. I want you to start to meet your target audience at their view of the world, not just from your view of the world, but understand their view of the world. Okay. And people will nod their heads and they'll write it down. Why? Because it's a nice, fluffy feeling kind of engagement. Okay. But I've got to teach you how to do that. I can't just say it because in theory it makes sense, but how the hell do you go out and do it? So it's the confidence aspect. It's the ability to see things from your target audience's view of the world, which is a term I use, which is communications empathy. So empathy often is understood in a very different way. I won't get into that now, but a term, communications empathy, which is seeing the world through your target audience's eyes. The third thing is the ability to influence and persuade. Influence and persuasion is done terribly in business. It absolutely is. So being able to bring in the 3 elements of influence and persuasion, which is credibility, logic, and emotion, bring the 3 of those things in to be able to effectively communicate it. And then the 4th thing is to understand what are the core human motivating factors of the people you're dealing with. If you can understand those 4 things, and I would say that the underlying foundation of it is that good professional self-esteem, I think 95% of the problems we deal with will disappear. And I say that, and I really mean this. I really, really mean this. If we can give clients a real good foundation of confidence, not arrogance, confidence. I think that
confidence, big difference.
Confidence is that does that enough, and I have enough internally here. I'm secure here, and then I can contribute. I think arrogance, and the way I say it to clients as well, is arrogance. I think it comes from an insufficiency, and it's where you're trying to take. You're trying to reduce somebody else and elevate your situation or what have you. But I also believe that arrogance is skin deep, and it's a veneer. And I think a lot of the time, world-class communicators can break it like that. They really can. They can break arrogance very quickly. But confidence comes from a sense of certainty. But when you have those 4 things, I think the vast majority of problems can go away. Because here's the other thing. If I can create that good professional self-esteem and get people to really see the value that they bring, then they're less inclined to go to that fight or flight mentality. And here's the thing: you think about it, cuz you go to Toastmasters, you do your presentation. If you know that you're confident, you've got something of real value, you're going to contribute to these people, then effectively what happens is you stay in a much better frame of mind. If you get rattled, as most people do when they start presenting, it's absolutely fine. And I feel nervous before I go out and present all the time. But if I can keep my clients in that positive, empowered mental and emotional state, they're going to have full access to their thought process. Because here's the thing.
Yeah.
The difference between that positive, empowered mental and emotional state and the negative, overwhelmed fight or flight mentality that we can often have if we go out and present, or we have a difficult conversation, or we have some conflict, you lose the ability to think clearly up to 31%. So you're 31% smarter when in that positive frame of mind. So if I can create that confidence by getting people to see the value that they bring, they're going to be able to deal with bigger and bigger problems and stay in a very, very empowered mental and emotional state. So that's your foundation for everything. I think as soon as that goes, you can have the best strategies in the world. You can barely remember your name when you go to fight or flight, let alone some complex strategy that some dude with a weird accent told you, you know?
It is.
Sorry, that was a ramble right there, mate.
That's all right. That's what we're here for, mate. That's the good you get when you sit down with this man, people. That's what you get.
Sorry, go on. Yeah.
Well, there's a few things we can talk about there, but you're right about that's what gave me a lot of confidence. Was once I finally realized what you were trying to tell me with the value that I brought to the table, I had a good think about it, and I realized that everything I'd been through and everything I've been through up to this point, I can use that to draw.
Absolutely.
And especially, like, for example, Toastmasters. Anyone doesn't know about Toastmasters, they international group that help you with your public speaking, amongst other great things. And table topics. Oh, when I first started, table topics is impromptu. So you're all sitting there. There's a person who's in charge of table topics, and you're in like a formal setting, and they stand up there and they've got half a dozen questions, and they'll pick people at random, and you've got to come and talk about that for 1 to 2 minutes.
So and totally random. You've got no pre-idea what's going on.
Nothing. Just, I think the last one I got was about politicians, and anyone who knows me, like I'll be honest, when I started Toastmasters, all I thought was the first two things that I always think. So here's an insight to me. First two things I always think. When someone asks me to go somewhere or do something, first question is in my brain is, what am I going to wear? Because all I want to do is wear singlets, shorts, and jandals. That's my most common attire, right? And I'm thinking to myself, I'm going to have to wear shoes. What kind of shirt am I going to wear? Is this formal? So that's what happens in my brain straight away. And secondly is, I hope they don't talk about politics because I'm lost. It's not, I just don't like it. I do not like politicians and politics and all the amble that goes. And I got hit with that. So that was a boomer last time, but I got through it because I've got a lot more confidence now. And the confidence has come from knowing that I can draw on all this experience that I've got, all these stories, and there's no need to panic. I don't have to fly away. I don't have to think, oh my God, this is terrible. So actually talk to myself and say, I'm excited for this. I'm really looking forward to this, to see what this question is and what I come up with. My brain just goes, oh, yeah, we'll do this.
Yeah.
If I sat there and thought to myself, oh, I hope they don't choose me. I'm terrified. I'm nervous. What's going to happen? I can't afford to lose another third of my brain, Paul. 31%. I'm a carpenter. I think we only start with about 42%. So it's a monster chunk. That being able to have the confidence that I've got some value that I can bring. I'm slowly getting some skills now that allow me to not so much turn a conversation, but relax enough to be able to find a niche that I can talk about.
Yeah.
And then realize that I've got all this information inside me that I think is common, but the person sitting opposite it might be a revelation to them. It might be exactly what they need to hear. And so I see myself as a person who, okay, I've got to give this information to that person. Now, if you say, I don't know why, but I love helping people and I love seeing the result that they get.
Yeah.
It's the most satisfying thing ever. Once I got my head around all that, it's changed the way I'm looking at everything. And it's changed the confidence levels I've got. So that is a very big one that you talk about. And it's taken me a long time to get to that point. It's not something that just happens. It takes a lot of practice.
Yeah. That's such a beautiful observation, mate, because it's something whenever I'm training my presenters, it's like, you know, if you start to see the value that you bring and you start to see how that common knowledge can be a revelation to your target audience that actually could positively impact their life, then you start wanting to contribute to your audience. And it's very difficult to stay in a shitty frame of mind whilst you're doing something good for somebody else that can never repay you. You know, it's like if you're in a negative frame of mind, go up and do something for, you know, buy somebody who's homeless, buy them a sandwich or something like that, or walking past, you're going to Coles and you see a dog that's tied up to the, you know, waiting for its owner to come out of Coles, and you stop and pet it and stuff like that. It's like, it's very difficult to stay in a negative frame of mind if you're doing something positive for somebody else. And this is the thing. when you start to see, when you and my clients and myself and everybody out there, when we start to see, maybe I do have some information that could be of benefit to these people. Now I'm in a different frame of mind. Now it's like, let me contribute, rather than defensiveness that often we can experience when we're exposed when it comes to presenting. When you're up there, you're standing up there, it's terrifying. It can be terrifying. You know, it's like everything is terrifying. Difficult questions are deemed as something negative, when it's really just where it could be interpreted as, this audience member is so positively engaged, they're fascinated, they want to know more. You know, it's the stories we tell ourselves.
Exactly. And there's another thing as being a leader, being a good leader, is if you can get your relationship with all your team members to the point where you know their strengths better than them, you can help them grow. Someone may not even know they've had this. You have a conversation with them, you find out something that they think is common. A certain topic comes up and you're like, you've got that in you, you know. So being able to communicate with people and find out things like that about them, draw it out from them. One lady at Toastmasters, we did an icebreaker speech. She's up to it as well. She asked me how I did mine, because she was struggling with hers. And I said, look, I don't know if this is going to work for you, but this is how I did mine. I did it in a logical sequence, in like a timeline, and laid it out how I did it. I cut pieces out, and I said, but here's the thing. I said, you're the expert on this. I said, nobody else was there. None of us were there. So we're not going to know if you left a good piece out or if you put a bad piece in. You know, we're not going to know. You're the expert on this matter. And that applies to everyone. Absolutely everyone. The value that you bring, like you said earlier, is unique to you. So you're the one who gets to put it out there and decide what you want to do with it. And then that became a revelation to her. And she was like, oh my God, you helped me so much.
Wow. That's awesome.
It's, and that was really rewarding. There's a Japanese belief that if you're in a bad mood or having a bad day and not feeling good about yourself, go and do something nice for someone else.
Okay.
It's exactly what you talked about. It's apparently it's a proven fact.
Yeah. So, no, it's a nice way of thinking about things. It really, I suppose when you do something nice for somebody who can't pay you back, or, you know, it's genuinely done from goodness, sometimes also you get that comparison of thinking, okay, I'm in a rough frame of mind right now, but I've just helped somebody else who's homeless, and maybe that gives you some degree of comparison where maybe I have some things I can be grateful for as well. Yeah, that's beautiful.
That's right.
That's absolutely beautiful.
And that leads us perfectly onto the next thing, which is meeting your target audience at their view of the world. Like that is I think that's another problem in training, especially when it comes to implementing the strategies. Is it's one thing to have the information, but to be able to deliver it to someone, you've got to try and figure out where they're coming from and what part of how to best deliver that information to them. Otherwise, it's going to bounce off.
Yeah, absolutely.
That must be something that you see quite a bit of.
Yeah, it's interesting, because I tell you, it's a perfect segue into this. You hit the nail on the head here. Very often when I say that, I'll go around the room and literally asking each person what they want to take away, asking deeper questions, because then I can pick up what the root cause of the challenges are. And very often in the first 3 or 4 people I speak to, I'll set the frame of always meet your target audience at their view of the world. And very interestingly enough, a lot of the time you see a involuntary reaction from some people in the room. So it might be like somebody look at me like this, or pupils dilate, or nostrils flare. And then what I'll do, because I know exactly what they think. Well, I think I do anyway. And I say, okay, listen, let me just qualify that for you. When I say meet somebody else at their view of the world, some of you might be thinking, well, Paul, what if I don't agree with their view of the world? So that's where I want to redefine it. And I want to redefine it in a way where view of the world is a point of view versus view of the world. If you and I have conflict over something, we have different points of view on that thing. But if I understand your view of the world, aka what motivates you, terminology that you use, are you a structured thinker, a big picture thinker, what type of words, or all of this type of stuff, what are your core motivating factors? If I can understand that, I can communicate in a way that's really going to resonate with you a hell of a lot more, and then we're going to find a way forward. So that really is, it's a big pushback. And this is going to sound terrible to say, but I see a lot of stuff that's like, it goes out on social media, and people saying things like, people would say things like, always meet your target audience at their view of the world. For some reason, that I think people want to be understood, and that's something that people will engage with. But and saying things like, just be confident, and it makes me so passionate. Let me say, it makes me so passionate, because that's, again, what we call TBU, which is true but useless. Now, if you say to somebody, and I had this with a client about 2 weeks ago. She's an absolute diamond, absolute diamond. There was a leadership workshop I was doing some work with her on. And she said the previous experience she'd had in leadership training, because she'd gone to a lot of leadership training, was people just saying things like, be a better leader. And then when she was saying, well, how do I actually be a better leader? It's like all this hypothetical stuff, like be confident, be inspirational, be visionary. But it's like, how do you actually do that? Yes, we agree that should be the outcome, but how do you actually do it? So everything has to be, you can't just say this. And she said to me, she goes, Paul, I asked the question and people just looked at me like I had two heads. It's like, if I say, how do I be a better leader? It's like, well, what are the breakdown of the steps? And this is why everything I teach, we start with the theory, the hypothetical stuff, but then there has to be the practical application of it as well, the step-by-step application. How do you start to see somebody else's view of the world? And I'll tell you this, how do you start being confident? It's not everybody who battles with confidence, I think, and it's not everybody who underestimates the value they bring to the table. I would say probably 95% of people would battle with that, underestimating the value they bring. I think there is a group of maybe 5%. For a number of reasons, they will see the value they bring. And very often I see this in very technically minded subject matter experts. They've studied for 5 years, 10 years. They've got the technical qualification. They know 1 + 1 = 2, and that's their role. And they have big confidence because they've got those huge qualifications, and people are always asking for and there's some other aspects on it as well. But I'd say 95% of people battle with that, underestimating the value they bring, and therefore things like the imposter syndrome is linked to it, low confidence, stress levels, I think, as well. The ability to not be seen as authentic, because very often if our body language doesn't support our tonality because we're not feeling confident, the words just don't match up. But here's the thing. I believe there are human hardwiring aspects that stop us, stand in our way from getting the results we're after. So let's break this down a little bit. Things like confidence. If I said that confidence comes from seeing the value that you bring, and seeing the value you bring increases professional self-esteem, so seeing the value that you bring, and then that will then tie into confidence. I believe there's a human hardwiring that stops us from doing that. And that human hardwiring, I believe, is the human brain has got a negativity bias.
Absolutely.
So if you think about it, and I'm sure we've spoken about this before, but if you think about it, if the human brain has got a negativity bias, and what I mean by that is we see things, we notice the negatives quicker than the positives. Very often, we potentially could see the negatives in the work we do, the mistakes we make, much more than the positives. I don't know what's going on with my camera here, mate.
Mr. Purple's back.
Yeah.
Hey.
Okay, there we go. So if we have an ability to notice the negatives more than the positives, this very, very often can play into our professional perception of ourselves. So I'll give you the example. If let's say, you go out and you present to 10 people, and again, 9 of them give you good feedback, 1 gives you bad feedback. Yes. You dwell on that negative feedback. We shouldn't, but we actually do. And then you come back to work and your boss says, "Oh, you need to go and give another presentation." In that moment, that self-doubt kicks in, that negative emotion. That I think there's a bias that's associated with it, a negative emotion bias as well. But then you go out and present, that negative self-talk is kicking in, and you don't speak well. How you label yourself and how you perceive yourself will, in terms of presenting, you'll have very low professional self-esteem there, because it's so easy to notice that. So what we effectively have to do to start getting clients to see the value that they bring is we want to start getting them to actually shifting that mindset and literally shifting it to create new neural pathways to be able to make it easier to notice the positives rather than the negatives, which is an exercise I undertake with a vast majority of my clients. That's one example. So I think it goes against human behavior, natural human behavior, which of course could be unlearned, we can learn something new, to be confident. Second example, active listening. Now, active listening is one of these terms that is so frequently used, and every single one of us would agree with it. Yes, active listening is a good idea. But anytime we're in a situation where we find two decision makers in deep conflict, it's not a good person, a bad person that's in conflict. It's two good people who effectively are locked in conflict, and they are effectively speaking past each other. They both know the terms active listening, but here's the thing. I believe as soon as any degree of negative emotion gets involved in the conversation, we stop listening to understand and start listening to get our point across, because it's more important for us to feel understood than it is for us to understand the other person. And I think this is not something glamorous to say, but it is a stumbling block I think people fall into. And I have to address these things as potential shortcomings that are massive hurdles for people who want to become better communicators. Because if you really want to become a better communicator, you have to be able to actively listen. And if you're sitting in a state where your professional self-esteem or confidence is low, it's going to make it easier for you to go to fight or flight, which means you do one of three things: become defensive, aggressive, or shut down. And you're certainly going to stop listening. So if we're focused on getting better outcomes for clients, to support clients to get the results that they're after, we have to make them aware of these potential shortcomings and come with solutions. It's no good me just standing out and saying to somebody, just be more confident and be a better leader and, talk about all these nice surface level things. It's like, how do you actually do that? So, that's a particular bugbear of mine. And even when we're talking about leadership, and I'll say, okay, what are the top 5 characteristics of world-class business leaders? And people will talk about these things, and they'll say something like, be aligned. Cool, I would agree with that. Be charismatic. Cool, I would agree with that. Be inspirational. Yes, I would agree with that. Now, dear team, that I've just given you 5 minutes to discuss these things. How do you become charismatic? How do you inspire people? How do you actually do this stuff? Because saying it is one thing, but you have to be able to apply it. If you can't apply it, you're wasting your time. Emotional intelligence is another one. How do you create emotional intelligence?
It all comes, well, for me, like I said earlier, I went to New Zealand, had a break, and I made it a point that everyone I came across was going to not make a better day, but I was going to try and interact with them positively.
Beautiful.
And I spent so much time. Once you realize that everything becomes, for me, every communication, every relationship I have, every tough discussion I have, every point of conflict becomes so much easier if you think about it from their point of view. Yeah, it really does. Any conversation, half the conversations, I'd be sitting there thinking to myself, how am I going to talk about something this guy likes so we can hit it off? And some of the outcomes were tremendous.
Beautiful.
The outcomes were huge. But meeting them, like you said, just because I'm thinking about their view of the world and their beliefs and their morals, and that doesn't mean I have to believe in them.
Yeah,
it's just understanding that that's where they're coming from. And when you understand that where they're coming from, it's like you said about it being negatively hardwired. Misery loves company. So much easier to make a connection with someone when you're pointing out the negatives.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
So much easier.
Yeah.
That's probably not something that I would suggest you do if you're going to have a long, positive relationship with someone, but that's where that stems from. So that's a whole nother discussion in itself, I think, with the whole misery love company thing. But once you can get, for me especially, once I can understand where they're coming from, and that usually takes a few questions, throw a few things out there. If we're in conflict, I can think about their side of things we'll align across a few things, and then we'll attack the problem better. Or I can bring them around to my way of thinking, or we can. Half the time, it ends up being a solution that neither of us were talking about or thinking
Beautiful.
about. But because we've turned and looked at it from the same way, or not going at loggerheads and things, there's another solution there that we both weren't listening to.
Absolutely.
So active listening, viewing. There's two things there. Number one is target audience's view of the world. That's huge. That is really huge. And if you want to start building confidence, if you want to start building good relationships, and you want to start building, like, you want to be inspirational, that's one of the core things. You really have to do that. And then the active listening. You know it yourself. You're talking to people and they're just not hearing you.
Yeah.
You're wasting your time. Or they're like, oh, yeah, I know all about this one, mate. I'm just here to, I'm just here because I got told to be here, that kind of thing. And your words are literally bouncing off them. And they're not involved in discussion at all. When, like you said, generally if it's an ego problem, they'll go just aggressive or antagonistic because they're in that fight or flight mode. They don't know how. But trying to really listen to what the person's saying. And if you can really listen to them and you can ask a couple of questions, maybe even mirror, get to the deeper problem, come around on their side, bang. That's one thing I think we really need to make sure we concentrate on.
Absolutely. Because for somebody who was maybe not listening to this conversation and not being privy to a lot of the conversations that you and I have had over sort of...
I hope they haven't been listening to the conversations we have, I'll tell you that much.
What do you think stops most people from actually going out and trying to see the world through somebody else's eyes? What do you reckon actually stops them from doing it?
I don't know.
I'm putting you on the spot, mate, but I really value your insights on this.
A lot of the time, I think when we go into a conversation, we want to get our point across. We want everyone to see the world our way, especially since in the last few years, everyone's become very divided. And very, So it can be quite difficult to the social skills side of things. I noticed that a lot. My daughters talk to me about a lot. People they work with are struggling. A lot of people don't want to go back to the office, and some people who do really struggle. And that's something that really has to be worked on. We really have to try and help those people and get them through. But as far as not wanting to see people's view of the world, maybe they see it as a concession. Maybe they see it as you're losing the argument already, when really it's a superpower to help you win it. It's nearly the exact opposite. If me and you are at it and I go, right, you know what, I'll have a think about where Paulie's coming from, and then I align myself with you, maybe it's like I've conceded something and I'm on the back foot, I'm lesser. Really, I'm now turning the conversation where I want it to go. And you're happy to do that because you don't see me as a threat.
Yeah.
So maybe there's that. Instead of seeing it as a concession and a negative thing, it's a superpower.
Yeah.
It really is. It's amazing the results you can get. You can still bang heads with people. Genuine different points of view is healthy. You don't want to be agreeing with everyone and everything they say, because that's going to go nowhere. It's going to get you in a bad spot.
You're going to get taken advantage of. Yeah.
Yeah. So having a disagreement on a point of view or a subject or a topic is a good thing. It doesn't mean you hate the person.
Yeah.
It's not. Again, maybe there's some things that people are slipping into here in terms of target audience's view of the world. You don't have to believe, you don't have to agree with it.
Exactly.
You don't have to take it home with you or get it tattooed on you. That's not what it's about.
Yeah.
And because you're disagreeing with someone and because they've got a different point of view with you, doesn't mean you hate them. It doesn't mean they hate you.
Yeah.
It's maybe there's a lot of misconceptions around that. Maybe that's something to do with it. Your thoughts?
When you just said that, there was a line that came back to me, and I don't know where this came from. I think it might have actually come from a social worker at one stage. There's somebody who was in my life. I can't remember who it was exactly, but somebody who was a phenomenal communicator with a great insight into psychology. And the words that were used were something along the lines of, because I've just written it down here now. If you come between someone and their reason why they can't achieve something, they will fight you tooth and nail. So if you come between someone and their reasons why they can't achieve something, they will fight you tooth and nail. So I think the context was I was trying to help someone in a situation with regards to, I don't know what it was. I think that they were not happy in their work. This is going back maybe 25 years ago. But I think I was trying to help somebody with regards to getting a job that they enjoyed or something like that. And my communications were really not good. It's something sort of we've worked on for so many years now, but I think there was somebody who was talking to me and they were just negative. I hate this, I hate that, I hate the next thing. And I'm trying to dig them out using positivity, because that's I thought was the best approach. It's like, of course you can, if you just change your mindset, or you start doing this or doing that. And it's like, I've had experiences where people have turned on me. It's like, they've got their reason why they have to stay in that rough place, and you're trying to give them a reason why they can get out, and you're telling them that they're wrong in their assumption, and then they fight back at you. And again, you've got the best of intentions in the world, but if you can come between somebody and their reason why they can't achieve the outcome that they're after, they'll fight you tooth and nail. Yes. And I think that ties in with what you were saying there a little bit, that they've conceded that effectively, maybe there is something that they're missing out on, and maybe they're taking that as then a personal attack, or that they're not good enough, which we all have a fear on some level. Effectively, I think that can cause conflict. And also, whenever I'm talking about building rapport and connection, which is something I think you're world-class at doing, literally world-class at doing, is being able to build that connection with people. So you've got two people who don't know each other. They build a connection before, maybe like they meet at a networking event or something like that. You build a connection, you start building that rapport, and that leads to knowing, liking, and trusting. I guess that's always the way I address it here. But one of the ways that I see extraordinary communicators building great rapport in a fraction amount of the time is they're not doing what everybody else is doing. Everybody else is building connection on easy to identify external things. You're wearing a particular jersey for a particular team. There's some banter back and forth on that. I see a photo of your family. I've got a family too. That type of thing. It's external factors that people are connecting with. But the best communicators, the best people who build rock solid rapport and connection in a fraction amount of time are building connections on internal factors, like values and beliefs around certain things. And I've seen it used, and it's very powerful. It has to be done authentically. If it's not done authentically, it's like a scalpel. A scalpel can get you in the right direction, but if you use it in the wrong way, it's going to do some serious damage here. But people connect. I think people very often connect over values and beliefs that they hold about certain things. And that can be, values and beliefs about anything, really, including, how they think about their own potential, and seeing value that they bring, or they think that the world's a terrible place, and that creates a connection with people as well. There
is one more thing that you just made me think about, and I just realized as you were saying it, I do this a lot. And like you said, the easy ones are when he's got an Aussie shirt on, he's got a Melbourne Storm shirt on, or anything like that, or Essendon or whatever it is. The external factors you can get, but one of the big breakthroughs, some of the most massive breakthroughs I've ever had, and I think this is one of the things that holds people back from aligning with other people, is learning to be vulnerable. If you can bring something, especially amongst us blokes, if you can bring into the conversation, or if you see where they're coming from, and you realize that you've been there and done that, and you think that they're going through a hard time, if you can align yourself with that and say, mate, I've been there too. I've been this. I've done that. That creates a collection like no other, because a lot of people don't want to talk about subjects like that. And it gets you started. The other person's like, instead of being at loggerheads, the other person is like, okay, he's admitted this. You can bring the aggression down a little bit. The embarrassment factor around it. and the connections can be really big and
I'll
deep.
tell you, I think I think I know exactly what you're talking about there, but how are you defining that word vulnerability? Because again, this is one of these very, very, very commonly used words, and people have got very different experiences with that word vulnerability. So, I mean, if you say to a South African, if you talk about being vulnerable, it's normally the reason why you got hijacked or broken into or something like that.
Yeah.
So what exactly do you mean by vulnerability? And just so we're clear, because this is always something that's it's a conversation point.
Well, vulnerable in terms of, especially around stuff that's very personal or embarrassing, that a lot of people don't want to talk about. Like I've said in the past, my disclaimer is I come from construction industry.
Yep.
So I've spent decades around 90% of blokes. That's where my workplace has been. So when you're talking about things like relationship breakdowns, when you're talking about things like depression, mental health, that's a big one. You can align yourself with someone very quickly if you talk about your experiences and how you got through.
Yeah.
Opposed to standing there and saying, mate, just have a beer, you'll get over it. It just, like you said earlier, it bounces off. Financial issues. Everyone's got money problems. And the amount of people that say to me, oh, it's all right for you now, your kids have left home, you're doing well, you're making heaps. Yeah, but I wasn't always like that, mate.
Yeah.
I've been where you are, living paycheck to paycheck, wondering where I'm going to get shoes for the kids next week. Like, if you can, instead of being, oh, come on, mate, just pick it up, you'll be fine, get another job, that kind of thing. If you can just take off that manly veneer and go, dude, I've been there. This is what happened to me. And then that opens up big doors as well, and makes big connections. Doesn't always work, and it's not always something that you should use as a standard opening, and it's not something that you should use to build relationships with. But learning to be vulnerable and learning to meet the other person at their view of the world, and thoughts around that, really listening to what they're saying, all stuff that plays in.
I think I like that approach, particularly after building that strong rapport. What I have seen,
it's not an opening. You don't start off being vulnerable, especially not around South Africans.
He won't do it twice, I'll tell you that much.
No.
It's the way we teach, the way I try to teach vulnerability particularly is being okay with being wrong or making mistakes.
Absolutely.
As long as, and I use it particularly, and again, same word can have different meanings, different people in different contexts. And I do it particularly for my leadership. When I'm training C-suite, they want to know how they can connect better with their staff. Then very often we talk about a degree of vulnerability and what that is, and the way, just so we're all clear, being okay with having been wrong in the past, or show that you've made a mistake before as well. So a great example is I come over and or you come over and I'm the new employee and I'm working on the Turner file, and you say, oh, I used to work on that Turner file, don't you worry, I've had some ups and downs with that client before in the past, and it's just like it's a bit of a humanizing thing which connects people, which is nice.
You also find that as a leader, learning to like give someone else there. If this person's got an area of expertise, you should really like listen to them in certain times and show that you're quite happy to take on the advice of someone who's got an area that they're really, really top class at.
Yeah, absolutely. And because I think that's where also inspiration comes from, Matt. I really do. I say to my leaders, it's like, listen, because they talk about inspiration, we talk about how to be inspirational and stuff like that, and I believe one of the most powerful things you can use to inspire people is to get an idea of positive values and beliefs that they hold about themselves, but they are not verbally sharing those positive values and beliefs that they hold about themselves, for risk of ridicule, or maybe that they think they don't really believe it. They would hope to have that. That'd be an aspiration. But if you then as a leader can say, listen, we're gonna be, we're working on this particular problem today, folks, and Craig, Cuz, You've had experience with this before. I know you're very good in this type of context, so I would love you to have a primary, significant amount of input on the work we're doing. I think if you start realizing people for positive values and beliefs that they would like to hold about themselves, but they won't readily communicate it, I think that's where a high degree of inspiration comes from. Because people want to be recognized for good things, and if you can start doing that in a workplace environment, people are they're coming to work and they're being recognized for how they want to be recognized, which is, I have strengths in this particular area, and you get recognized for that. I'm convinced people start associating positivity and that recognizing in the workplace, in the work that they're doing. And that only leads to a much higher level of creativity and, people a lot more ownership and accountability on what they're doing as well. And, certainly when we're building high performing teams, I have to get people to see, obviously, how they fit into the team and the value that they bring, but then also getting people recognizing and calling out for, and I don't really like that term too much because it kind of sounds accusational, but recognizing people for areas that you see them as doing well, and giving them context. And I think that's really awesome. I really believe it's powerful that,
It is very powerful in a team setting. It is. In team setting, being able to defer to someone else's area of expertise and work kind of laterally across the team instead of up and down, working a bit of a hierarchy or a status or something like that. Getting your team to work laterally across and swap roles, mate, you're onto a winner. You've got a really high performing team there.
Yeah. No, it's interesting, man. It's, God, how lucky are we to work in this type of industry, with regards to,
absolutely.
And it's something, I mean, you and I always talk about this, and if I'm going for a walk or what have you, I got my earphones in listening to stuff about this, trying to figure out better ways of being able to help people get those better outcomes. And it's such a joy when you can help people get those results in something they do for 30% of their adult lives,
Yes.
And no, it's awesome. Absolutely fantastic. Absolutely fantastic.
It is. We had lots of other things to talk about today, but that's not going to happen. I think there's quite a few more things that we pick up in training that we see a lot of people making mistakes around, but we can touch on those later. One thing you'd have people take away, and one thing they think, and I'll get you to think about it in terms of when they're coming to training. Or when they're looking at getting some training, what are a couple of key tips that you'd give people when they come in and sit down? I mean, obviously, have yourself all sorted, well rested, get some food into you, maybe some coffee, and pay attention and active listening. But what are a couple of key things from your side of the fence that you really reckon would help out some of your clients when they come to you?
I'll tell you what, there's two questions. Anytime I sit down with clients, two questions I always want to start with. Always I want to start with. So somebody's approached me, they've emailed me or hit me in LinkedIn or something like that and said, listen, we'd like to have a conversation around a particular workshop that you folks run. I want to ask them two questions at the start. And the first question is, what motivated this training? What actually motivated this training? So is it just something you do every year for team morale, which is great, awesome. If you do that, that's fine. If there's maybe been a customer service survey that's come back that hasn't been very good, NPS scores, those scores haven't been good. Maybe you're launching into a new area and you want the team up and running, but I need to understand the motivation for the training first, because very often that will allow me to get an idea of some of the challenges you're dealing with, and then I can personalize that delivery to make sure we overcome that particular hurdle, that motivation, that initial motivation, or at least achieve it. Second thing is what is the specific outcomes that you want the clients to take away from the training? So the attendees of the training, what do you want them having when they leave? So what have they taken away? Is it a high level of confidence? Is it their ability to communicate in the same language, in the same way? Is their ability to deeper understand each other? Is it a way to get an earned advantage over the competitor on a regular basis? If I can understand those two things, then I can really start to firstly personalize that training as much as possible. But secondly, I can actually tweak the delivery in the room as well. So we're really fully aligned. I can get a deeper idea of where that whole group's going to. Then all I want really for the attendees is to come with an open mind, and I want people to tell me what specifically they want to take away. From time to time, I have people say, "Oh, I'm just here to brush up on my skills." It's just like, give me a target, man. Give me a target, please.
Well, yes, I agree. Now that's what I would recommend that people do, regardless of whether you think you're going to learn something or not. You're always learning.
Yeah,
always learning. Get that into your head. That growth mindset, that learning mindset is huge, especially when maybe you're at a conference or a training event or whatever, and you're not really interested in it. Just really sit there and try and pay attention, take some notes, let the information wash over you, because it may be some of the best information in the world. It's just not suited to you at that time. Perfect example. Going back over old books I've read.
Yes. Yeah.
At the time, you read a book, an audio book for me, learning about sales or whatever, and maybe I pick up 60% of it, and it's really stuff that I can get up and run with and think about and whatnot. You go back to it a year later, 18 months, 2 years later, it's a completely different book. And I mean that in terms of what you take with you, and that's because you've come along on your journey wherever you are. There's other bits, other skills. Some stuff may be too advanced for you when you first read it.
Mm.
And when you come back to it, it's exactly where you are, like, holy moly, let's go again.
Absolutely.
So, and that I think is the same with training. There's stuff that I've been through that I've never needed to use, and all of a sudden, 10 years later, bang, it pops back. Whoa.
Except for Pythagoras theorem, yeah? And trigonometry.
You can't spell that. Don't know what it's about. All I know is a 3, 4, 5 triangle. I can set that out because I'm a chippy. That's it. And I don't even need that anymore because I've got a laser that does it for me. So, but yeah, those are the things. You never know when you're going to need something. Just keep those ears open, people.
Absolutely. And the other thing is your time is valuable, so you might as well take something from it. Be open for the learning.
Yeah. Who knows where you're going with this? So, Mr. Harrison, once again, a pleasure to talk to you.
Mr. Loader, always a pleasure, sir. I really appreciate it.
I'll see you on the next one. Any questions, any queries, hit us up on the socials, LinkedIn, even wherever you're listening to this. I'm pretty sure it's got comments and questions. And we'll see you on the next one. Take care. Thanks, everyone.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, folks. Take care. Cheers.